Hello, this is Anna Imagination with the Healing Garden, and welcome to Shifting Perspectives. It is 7 a.m. in New York State. It's cold. I'm wearing my bathrobe. Now, on this one, I am talking about there is toxic glorification that has been absolutely crammed down our throat for probably a very long time, way too long. And it's at a point now where when I look at people, when I bring in how many people are basically reiterating the same thing. My parents were horrible. My parents were abusive. My parents were. And at the same time, we're going, honor your mother and father. And as a psychologist, when you sit down to work with somebody, the biggest obstacle that you have is the mind of your patient and versus their adoration and respect for their parent. Most therapy revolves around trying to get your client or patient to even approach the topic of your parents are shitty people. Most of them were so adamant to protect their parents because of Stockholm syndrome, which we're going to talk about. And what ends up happening is it significantly delays any kind of progress because we all are raised with a conditioned Stockholm syndrome for our parents. And most of our parents were horrible, horrible people or very abusive narcissists. It's a rare fluke that you have somebody who's actually worth honoring. Now, that being said, the word honor means great respect, and the word respect means admiration. That's all it means, to admire. So every time you have respect for someone, you admire them. The problem is when you're 4 and you don't know any accomplishments or any mental condition of your parents, they've given you no reason to admire them. Now, you might need to heed your parents. Heeding is not the same thing as honoring. Heeding is not the same thing as respecting. And definitely a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old really needs to heed an adult figure who can keep them safe. But heeding is not the same thing as honoring or respecting. So we have something in our country that I like to call toxic glorification. Because what it does is it literally conditions our brains at a very young age to have Stockholm syndrome for, in essence, a bunch of narcissists, a bunch of codependents, sometimes a bunch of alcoholics, or people who struggle with addiction. We have Stockholm syndrome conditioned by religion and society to conform to this concept that we need to respect people who are most likely very bad for us. The problem with this message is when you get to that point where you're ready to confront your problems, you have such a significant loyalty, Stockholm syndrome, to your abusers, your parents, that you are refusing, that many people refuse so much of the therapy. There are some clients where everyone wants to come in and talk about all the abuse they've endured. This is textbook. Every person walks in and they want to talk about the person who abused them last, the most recent abuser. Therapists always want to go right to, let's talk about your parents. And they don't want to. They're like, no, that's not the problem. They had a great childhood. Oh, you did you? If you had a great childhood, then why are you seeking out toxic partners? People with great childhoods don't tolerate abuse. If you are abused at all in a relationship, it's because your parents taught you how to do that. If you seek out abusive relationships on any level, it's because your parents taught you to, because your parents did abuse you. But no one wants to hear about this. In fact, a lot of people fight psychologists and therapists when it comes to this fact. You are not going to resolve your abuse problems until you get to the core of the problem, which is your parents. And the more time you spend talking about your abusers, your rapists, everybody else, the less you are focusing on the actual problem and the more you are delaying the issue. Talking about your recent abusers, your husbands, your partners, your spouses, all of that absolutely is irrelevant to solving trauma. It is ineffective and it's nothing. Because your partner, as much as you don't want to hear this, is absolutely replaceable, is absolutely non-contingent to your identity. Your identity was already made, established, and in place prior to you finding your emotional prosthetic. Your emotional prosthetic is not the problem. You being raised poorly by incompetent parents is the problem. But because we have this massive toxic glorification going on, where we are rammed down that throat of the lesson, honor your and respect your parents, it's suddenly it puts this thing inside of our head so that by the time we are 20, we are defending our abusers, our first abusers, tooth and nail over their behavior. We are defending and making excuses for our parents' behavior. And you might have a really great person as a mother or a really great person as a father, but as a mother and a father, they were fucking horrible parents. And no one wants to talk about that. It's the one thing that no matter how you dice it, no matter how you cut it, even if you had a phenomenal relationship with your parents and a phenomenal childhood, and you go through life living a very good life, and then something traumatic happens to you. And sometimes trauma does happen to just anybody randomly. Sometimes it is such an outward trauma that it's just, and you crumble. But you rise back up again because you did have solid parents. That is what good parenting is when you are confronted with a trauma and you can handle it. If you are ever at that point where you are constantly inside a chaotic mind, a mindset where you don't know who you are and you cannot find grounding, it is because your parents were shitty people. Your parents were shitty parents. No one is taught proper parenting skills. All we are doing is copying the behaviors of our parents before us, and everyone has narcissism. Everyone has codependency. I have yet to meet a proper, healthy couple raising a child. Even the ones who are the best, and I did meet a couple people, they were the best, supposedly. Nope, they were level 2s cramming religion down their children's throats, making the child so conformed to their religion that nothing else was even possible. God forbid they have a drop of creativity on their own. The illusion when you're stepping away from it is, wow, that's a really good parenting. They're just very strict. Because when you zoom in and I start to see that man crumbling over his horrifically strict parenting that he vows was the most righteous, beautiful kind of upbringing he could ever wish for. No. When you have the freedom to be who you are, exactly who you are, without any kind of consequence coming to you, when you receive full and total acceptance and not just tolerance, but celebration for who you are, so that you feel so safe that there is no qualms about doing and being whoever you want to be. And you were raised with the 6 core ethics, you're set. But those are the people who do not seek therapy. Not at all. Those people are so not needing therapy. They're not the ones coming, crying, falling apart. And that's it right there. You are in a therapist's office. You are seeking help because your parents done fucked up. And the problem is, if you are walking into therapy with a determination to defend these people who didn't raise you properly, it's going to set your therapy back. I am huge on we really need to stop deifying parents. We really need to stop congratulating people for breeding, because it's not an accomplishment. Having sex is not an accomplishment. Having a child by default does not make you a good parent. Just because your intentions are good does not mean you're going to succeed at this job. It's such a mind-bogglingly stupid thing about our culture. And it's this concept of no one dares to contradict it, because the minute you contradict it, you have to admit that your parents were not good for you. And what's really at stake here, what is really on that bottom line, is we have a deep, deep association of our safety that is linked to our parents. That safety is so deep that it is actually about our survival. So when we confront our parents, we're actually risking our survival. When we speak out against our parents, it feels like we are compromising our survival. I'm going to die if I speak poorly of my parents. That is the programming. This is an old, archaic program that's been there since the Ice Age, because in the Ice Age, it was required. You did die without your parents. And we have this massive death versus our parents that is so deeply embedded into us that no matter what they do to us, we defend them to our deaths. And it's this unrealistic deification of mentally ill people that we put on this massive pedestal. We condition our children to have Stockholm syndrome over their parents at the earliest of age. And if you show any kind of disrespect by the time you're 3, 4, or 5, you're beaten, slapped, threatened, and you're thrown garbage like honor your father and your mother. And the ironic thing is the people who quote that shit the most are narcissists wanting to completely control their children. It is the most favored Bible verse of narcissists. Honor thy father and mother. And it's extraordinary to see. If your parents are the kind of parents who regurgitate honor thy father and mother, they're probably a narcissist. Because people who are honorable don't say that shit. Here's a fun red flag that I use. If somebody says to you, trust me, you can't trust them. Because only dishonest people will say, trust me. Biggest red flag is the words trust me. Second biggest red flag is the words I'm honest. When you hear those words, when somebody says those two things to you, it's a red flag. It is a huge, whoa, there's something seriously, because the only people who use those terms are narcissists seeking to control you. No one else says that. Honest people do not tell you they're honest. Lying people will sit there and reaffirm that they're not lying. And it's ridiculous how much we just don't get this. How much we glorify our parents, how much we defend our abusers. I'll have some clients and they will just absolutely rave about how great their parents were. And then we'll talk about all the things they want to talk about, get nothing resolved. I'll go back to their parents, and then we'll start digging. And then they'll start to reveal some of the things they deal with. And I'm like, that's narcissism. That is how deeply embedded it is. Toxic glorification of our parents is not good. Honor and respect need to be earned. No child before 20 years old should ever talk about how great their parents are. No child ever should talk about how great their parents are. If the child decides to show that kind of respect and esteem all on their own, great. But if it's forced, if it's something that the parent has to adamantly push down the child's throat, that parent is toxic. That parent is a narcissist. If the child is free to think of their parents however they want, and the child naturally comes to these conclusions and honor and respect and admiration for the parents all on their own, okay. But you need to let the child come to those conclusions on their own. If you're telling your child that they need to respect you, you're not parenting right. You're not parenting right, because respect is something that is naturally develops just by you having the proper ethics. You don't have the proper ethics, they're not going to respect you, because children see through bullshit. Children are so authentic that they can see bullshit and they call out bullshit. If a child is inconsistent, if a child is violent or angry, it's because of the parent. It's because the parent has not provided security, because the parent has either over-enabled or has over-neglected. They are not balanced, or they're inconsistent. You might have one parent who's over-enabling while the other is absolutely absent. You might have two parents who are both overly strict, two parents who are completely abandoned and neglectful of their child. These are going to have significant personality results that develop into mental illness very, very early on, that most likely will develop into violence and abuse. And then the parents spend more time arguing over which parent is fucking up the children. And we're told to honor these people. We're told to respect these people. We deify them. We put them on a pedestal. We glorify our parents. They are broken, sick people. They are not capable of raising children. They should not have bred. They should not be having sex. They were irresponsible, mentally sick, abused people. And they decided to have children. And no one's talking about that. Everyone just wants to talk about their spouses and how their spouses abuse them. No, you are glorifying some really bad people. Now, my parents were so toxic that my brother and I were both real down to earth about our expectations with our parents. We were both around 10 years old, 12, when we both caught on that, oh, our parents are really, really not good parents. And it was really like, by the time he and I were both 12, we had it solid figured out. Our parents, we threw them away like, yep, there was no glorification. We were both very realistic about the treatment we were getting and the incompetency of both of our parents. There was no glorification going on there. None at all. We realized that we were two Gen X's who were very much going to self-parent ourselves because our parents didn't exist. And it was just the way of it. We understood that. So, and it was a huge thing when you go into therapy and you don't have Stockholm syndrome of your parents to get over. And it's being unrealistic, lying to yourself, being too afraid to be honest about how horrible your upbringing really was. And it's all because we have that safety survival equals parents embedded into our brain, combined with their need for approval. And the only reason why we need them to approve of us is because if they don't approve of us, we'll die. It's just old archaic thinking. And it gets to a point where once you reach a certain point of education and intelligence, you can overcome that thinking. It's very much, I call it Neanderthal thinking. I call it Neanderthal mind, because there's a split happening right now. There really is a divide happening. It's an educational divide. There's the Neanderthal mind, and then there's the next level of evolution, the intellect. I call it the intellect versus the Neanderthal, because the Neanderthal mind is still running off of Ice Age programming. And as a result, it's just when you have a smaller hippocampus. And you see this so much with perspectives 1 through 4. They very much have a Neanderthal mindset. They very much have that survival is stronger than anything else. And when you are competing with your survival, and I'm not talking about you being in an abusive situation and you trying to survive it. I'm not talking about that kind of survival. I am talking about the Ice Age programming that if your parents don't love you, you will die. That survival. So it's your safety, your survival versus your parents' approval. If you are still in that mindset, you are not watching this video most likely. I'm going to tell you right now, if you have that mindset, there's a good chance you are not seeking to get out of your situation, because those kind of people do not value growth. Those kind of people, when they have a problem, they sit in the problem and they complain about it. They don't seek out the help because they're a Neanderthal mind. And as a result, what we are seeing is this massive intellectual gap that's occurring. No one's talking about this. And I love, like, why is no one talking about this? It is so obvious. There is this massive divide of intelligence happening in our culture right now, where the Neanderthal mindset is over here and the intellects are getting smarter. And the people who aren't growing are, I can't tell if they're getting even more unsmart, if they're getting stupider, or if we are just growing that fast that we're getting further and further away from them. So there is this massive intellectual divide happening where you have a lot of intellects and you have Neanderthal mind. And the Neanderthal mind basically is where we all start off, because perspectives 1 through 4 are doing a lot of breeding. And as a result, what's resulting is we're being horrifically abused for our nonconformity. And we're trying to escape the land of no books. We're trying to escape the land of no books. And we get over here and we're like, oh my God, there's people. And this is really it. There's a lot of intellects out there, a lot of intelligent people who have to escape the land of no books. And that's where we are all almost raised, is this land of, are your parents overly religious? Well, yeah, that's because they have the Neanderthal mindset. Are they abusive, narcissistic, sexually abusive? Well, that's the land of no books. Are your parents so obsessed with the politics and making sure everyone follows the rules while they are incapable of their own self-government? Yeah, that's the land of no books. These are not intelligent people. And the reason why they're not intelligent is because they don't value education or growth. They value the hierarchy. They value status. They value material possessions. They value control and power, and they value exercising that feeling of control over other people by enforcing their own rules onto them. Welcome to the land of no books. You were probably raised here. But if you're an intellect, you're dying in that kind of a culture. It is killing you. It is eating you up, and you just want to get out of it. But to escape the land of no books, you got to be smarter than everybody else in there. Because it's not so much the rat race. That is just the mush pit, the mash pit of hell. That's what that is. And in the meantime, the intellects, when you get out, you're so free of it. But you've got this massive hold of that safety, survival equals parents attached to you. And that's really what you are shedding when you leave. And this is huge. You are supposed to leave your family community and grow up. You are supposed to leave the nest, but we're not leaving the nest. We're still there. We're holding on to it. We're concerned. No, leave the nest. Get away from it. Absolutely. Sever the ties from your toxic parents. It's okay to not hate the people who treated you like shit. You're not up against parents. You're up against your own Stockholm syndrome. That's all this is. You absolutely have Stockholm syndromes for your parents, because you had it rammed down your throat that you had to support them. You had to honor them. You have to love them. You have to take care of them. No, you don't. These were bad people who abused you. That's why you're fucked up. Now you have to go undo all the shit that they caused you. And when you are stable, when you are solid, when you've got your identity back and you have perspective, when you understand what they did to you, then ask yourself the question, should I let these people back in my life? I've talked to a few people where they've completely severed off their parents, and then out of guilt, they've gone back. And then they talk to me about the torment of having to deal with that. And it's like, why are you putting yourself through it? What do you owe these people? And that's just it. You don't owe your parents a goddamn thing. You don't. Newsflash. This is really, digest this. A gift is not something given to you where you get to take it with the foot clause, oh, you now owe the giver. There is no owing of the giver. Whether your parents like it or not, when they gave you life, that was not a, you now owe the giver for eternity. That's not how it works. Life is a gift. You received a gift. You say thank you, and that's all you owe them. Period. You don't even owe them the thank you. If someone decides to give a gift to a rude person, that's their problem. You don't owe them anything just because they gave you life. The only people in the world who give gifts and expect a return are narcissists. So if your parents are the parents sitting there throwing it down in your face, I gave you life, you have to listen to me. That's slavery. I did something for you, you now owe me. That's indentured servitude. My God, parents love that one. There are so many parents who love this one, where they will give birth to you and then insist you are their indentured servant. They were breeding slaves for their ego. That's what they were doing. And if your parent falls into that category, be realistic that your parent falls into that category. If your parent is obsessed with religion and was absolutely intolerant of anything else, that is not a good home. Intolerance is toxic. Even if they are kind to you, kindness is not good. Tolerance is a massive, massive. Imagine that culture and knowledge is a buffet of food. And when you grow up in a second perspective culture where religion is absolutely all that matters and everything outside of that religion is intolerance, what they're really doing is starving you, giving you one meal, period, and then being nice about it and kind about it, and conditioning you to be grateful for your one meal, even though they have intellectually starved you from all of this other information. A lack of tolerance is not good. So many of us have this massive concept of just glorify the parents. And it's that Stockholm syndrome. And if we're not talking about it, we're not realizing it. And it all comes back from, do you have a Neanderthal mindset? Do you have this concept of, if you don't do ABC for your parents, if you don't think a certain way about your parents, it's going to kill you because it's the Ice Age and parents equal survival? That doesn't exist anymore. Now, a lot of parents are really messed up. A lot of parents have a lot of problems. And if you are not addressing or being realistic about the kind of parents your parents were, how intolerant they were, that's not going to do you any favors. It's going to significantly hold you back from your own healing. It's going to absolutely deter and prolong all the work you have to do. Every time you complain about your spouse, your partner, your children, that is a diversion from the actual problem. Every time you talk about an ex-boyfriend or some person who abused you somehow, diversion. That's not the problem, because they were not present for your core programming when you were alive the first 8 years of your life. The people that we most complain about are the people who were not part of our initial formative years. The people who are responsible for our behaviors now as adults are from the people who are responsible for our programming in our formative years, our parents. And if your parents were so incompetent that your grandparents had to raise you, that's a clue. If your grandparents had more hand in raising you than your parents, that's also the problem. Your parents are 100% the core defining root of your identity just for the first 8 years of your life. And if they fuck that up, that's going to stay with you. Now, if you realize this and you resolve it, you're fine. But we're going back to those first 8 years of your life. What did you endure? What did they put you through? What things were allowed? What messages, what subtle messages, what words did they say? Fathers are renowned for this. What parochial, or not parochial, what phrases, what proverbs were your parents most renowned for saying to you? Because their most renowned proverbs, their sayings or their mottos, is absolutely what's scarring you. I have a stack of proverbs my father said to me that are constantly running on replay in my mind, that I constantly have to like garbage. Every time I remember my father, this stack of proverbs comes back into my mind. Not my father, not any fun things, not any laughter or smiling. He did not do that. Just the stack of proverbs. And that stack of proverbs is what I had to overcome to move on and heal. My mother had a stack of her own proverbs that I had rammed down my throat, all religious based, that I'm like, it was all my status as a girl, my status as my intelligence goes. It was all about how pretty I was, how smart I shouldn't be. It was all about the disapproval they had because I was too smart. It was all about how I needed to act like a girl, how I needed to be a lady. It was absolutely the same rhetoric on constant replay for 20 years. You pay taxes and you die. I'll die, thank you, because that's a life I don't need or want. And that's really, when it comes down to it, that's really, stop glorifying your parents. Acknowledge that you most likely have Stockholm syndrome for your parents and that they were really bad parents. Because if they weren't bad parents, you would be not looking at videos on how to help yourself with your mental work. It's because your formative years did not go the way they should have gone. Take a look at Triadic Healing. I have a DIY Triadic Healing where it walks you through the whole program, literally revolves around the process that you should have undergone by your parents. So it completely corrects the first 8 years of your life. It sets everything in place by showing you and teaching you and helping you internalize the 6 core ethics into you so that you straighten everything out. If you love shit like this, like, subscribe, follow, comment below. Let me know what part of the show resonated with you, and donate to the garden. Help us grow. Down below, you can take a look at the Triadic Healing, which is getting started. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.